The orderlies arrived at 6:47 a.m. Henry Vance heard them before he saw them. The wet crunch of unfamiliar tires on his gravel driveway, a sound that didn't belong in the pre-dawn quiet of October. He stood in his workshop, hand resting on a half-finished jewelry box made of cedar. The wood still warm from yesterday's sanding. The smell of sawdust hung in the cold air like his breath. He'd known this day would come. Had prepared for it the way a carpenter measures twice and cuts once, with patience, with precision, with an understanding that the foundation holds long after the paint peels. The doorbell rang. Not a knock, a bell. Official. The kind of sound that precedes paperwork. Through the workshop window, Henry watched them emerge from the white van. 2 men in navy uniforms, faces neutral and professional. Behind them, Karen stood by her Mercedes, illuminated by her phone screen in the grey morning light. She wore heels, expensive ones, the kind that clicked against stone, and a blazer that probably cost more than the orderlies made in a week. She didn't look at the house, she looked at her phone, scrolling, always scrolling. Henry removed his canvas work apron, stiff with decades of varnish and sweat, and hung it on the brass hook he'd forged himself in 1982. The hook was still solid, the foundation still held. He walked through the house he'd built, past the kitchen cabinets he'd installed, each one fitted with joints so tight you couldn't slip a business card between them, past the living room floor he'd laid, choosing each oak plank for its grain, knowing how the afternoon light would move across the wood for the next 40 years. Past the photographs on the wall, his wedding day, his wife's smile, Karen as a little girl before money had poisoned her into something unrecognizable. He opened the door. The taller orderly, name tag reading Marcus, held a clipboard. The shorter one, Deshaun Assar, held nothing, but his eyes were kind. Young men, working men. They didn't want to be here. Mr. Vance, Marcus's voice carried the apology of a man who'd done this before. That's me. Sir, we're with Summit Care Transport. We have authorization to take you to Shady Pines Assisted Living. Do you have a bag packed? Henry looked past them to Karen. She was walking toward the porch now, heels clicking against the stone path he'd laid 20 years ago. Click, click, click. Each step a countdown. Pops! Her voice was sugar over gravel. Don't worry about anything. I've taken care of everything. That was the truth, wasn't it? She'd taken care of everything. The fake doctor visits, the missing mail, the planted evidence of his supposed decline, the guardianship papers, the power of attorney. She'd been meticulous. So had he. Do you have a bag, Mr. Vance? Marcus asked again, gentler. No, Henry said. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. Karen's heels clicked up the porch steps. Her perfume arrived before she did, something expensive and chemical that cut through the morning air like bleach through water. Pops, we've been over this. She touched his arm. He pulled away. Her smile tightened. You left the stove on last week. You forgot your medication. The doctors said... I'm 72, Henry interrupted. Not dead. Of course not, Pops. That's why we're getting you help. She turned to the orderlies. I'll pack for him. Give me 5 minutes. She disappeared into his house, moving with the confidence of ownership she didn't actually have. Henry stood on the porch he'd built and studied the 2 young men. Deshaun shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Marcus checked his clipboard, avoiding eye contact. You boys do carpentry? Henry asked. Deshaun blinked. Sir. Carpentry. Building things with your hands. I built a bookshelf once. From IKEA. Henry almost smiled. That's not carpentry, son. That's following instructions. Real carpentry is when you understand that the foundation holds long after the paint peels. Marcus and Deshaun exchanged glances, but said nothing. From inside, Henry could hear Karen opening closets, pulling out drawers. She knew exactly where everything was. She'd been cataloguing his possessions for months, calculating their resale value while pretending to care. The smell of cedar drifted from his workshop, mixing with the antiseptic smell coming from the van's open doors. 2 worlds colliding, the world of honest work and the world of institutional efficiency. Karen reappeared with his overnight bag, slightly out of breath, triumph flickering behind her concerned daughter mask, All set. She handed the bag to Marcus. Pops, they're going to take good care of you. And I'll handle everything here. The house, the bills, all of it. You don't need to worry about anything. Henry looked at her, really looked at her, and saw his late wife's features twisted by desperation and greed. She needed this. Needed it with the fevered intensity of a gambler who'd mortgaged everything on one final bet. He climbed into the back of the transport van without another word. The orderlies secured his seatbelt. The doors closed. Through the rear window, Henry watched Karen standing in his driveway, already pulling out her phone before the van had left the property. The house he'd built, every board, every nail, every careful measurement, disappeared behind the trees as they turned onto the main road. Marcus drove. Deshawn sat in the passenger seat. Neither spoke. Henry sat in the back and thought about the papers he'd signed 4 months ago in Mr. Henderson's office. The trust agreement, the deed transfer, the careful, patient preparation of a man who'd spent 50 years learning that you measure twice and cut once. Karen thought she'd won. She had no idea the game was already over. The van turned onto Route 7, heading south toward Shady Pines, 20 miles away. 20 miles from the house he'd built to the institution where she'd warehoused him. But Henry wasn't worried. The foundation holds long after the paint peels. And Karen was about to learn that foundations don't bend, don't break, and don't forgive mistakes. The first board went up in May of 1982. Henry remembered because it was the week after his wedding, and his new wife, Sarah, Karen's mother, had stood on the empty lot holding a thermos of coffee and watching him mark the foundation stakes. The lake behind them had been calm, reflecting the morning sun in shades of gold. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" she'd asked, smiling. "I'm a carpenter," he'd said. "This is what I do." And he'd built it. Timber by timber, wall by wall, every joint mortised and tenoned, every corner checked for square, every measurement verified twice before cutting once. It took him 3 years of weekends and evenings after his day job, but when it was done, the house stood solid and true. Sarah had loved it. Karen, just a little girl then from Sarah's first marriage, had loved it too. She'd run through the rooms, her laughter echoing off the walls Henry had framed, and for a while, everything had been simple. But Sarah died 7 years ago, and Karen had changed. The girl who'd played in the sawdust of his workshop had become a woman who saw everything, including him, as a transaction, a problem to solve, an asset to liquidate. The letter from Morrison, Chen & Associates arrived on a Tuesday in June. Henry found it mixed with the usual junk mail, credit card offers, grocery circulars, catalogues for walk-in bathtubs he didn't need. But this envelope was different. Heavy stock, embossed return address, estate planning specialists. He hadn't contacted any estate planning firm. He sat at his kitchen table, reclaimed oak built in 1987, surface worn smooth by decades of coffee cups, and opened the envelope with the bone-handled letter opener Sarah had given him for their 20th anniversary. "Thank you for your interest in our estate services. We look forward to helping you protect your assets and plan for your family's future." Henry read it twice, his woodworker's hands steady despite the arthritis that had started creeping into his knuckles. Someone had used his name to contact this firm. He looked around his kitchen. Everything was exactly where it should be. The copper pot rack he'd installed, the ceramic canisters Sarah had collected, the refrigerator humming its familiar rhythm, but something felt wrong. It had felt wrong since Karen moved back in. "Pops, I'm worried about you." Karen had appeared on a Sunday in April unannounced, carrying a casserole and wearing an expression of carefully practiced concern. "I'm fine," Henry had said, because he was. 72 wasn't dead. He still walked 3 miles every morning, still worked in his shop every afternoon. His mind was sharp as the chisels in his tool chest. "You're alone in this big house." Karen set the casserole on the counter, lasagna, store-bought, reheated. "What if you fall? What if something happens?" "I have my phone. I have neighbors." "Let me stay for a while, just until I find a new apartment. We can keep each other company. Mum would have wanted that." And there it was, the invocation of Sarah, the guilt card played with surgical precision. Henry had promised his dying wife he'd look after Karen. "She makes poor choices," Sarah had whispered in her hospital bed, But she's still my daughter, promise me, Henry. He'd promised. So Karen moved in with her designer luggage and her laptop and her phone that never stopped buzzing with notifications. At first it seemed fine. She cooked occasionally, mostly takeout, did some laundry, asked about his day. But then the small things started. His car keys would disappear, only to turn up in strange places. The bathroom cabinet, the workshop once in the freezer. Karen would find them with a sad shake of her head. Pops, you really need to keep track of these. His pill organizer, just blood pressure medication, nothing serious, would be out of order. Sunday where Wednesday should be. Karen would fix it with a concerned frown. Maybe we need to set reminders on your phone. Bills vanished from the hall table. Karen paid them. Don't worry, I took care of it. But he'd find the invoices later, marked with notes in her handwriting. Forgot again. Memory issues? Then came the phone call he wasn't supposed to hear. Henry had picked up the workshop extension to make a call and heard Karen's voice on the kitchen line. Yes, Dr. Patel, I'm very concerned. He's forgetting things, getting confused, leaving appliances on. He'd hung up quietly, his heart pounding. That night at dinner, Thai takeout on Sarah's good china, he'd confronted her. Karen, I heard you talking to my doctor. She looked up from her pad thai, face innocent. Oh? I was just checking on your prescriptions. You're almost out of... You told him I was confused, forgetful. Well, she set down her fork. You have been a little forgetful lately, Pops. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's normal at your age. I'm 72, not 90. I know I'm just trying to help, but her eyes were calculating. Cold. That's when Henry started paying attention. Henry began documenting everything. When Karen was out, and she was out often, taking phone calls on the driveway, pacing and arguing with someone, he'd check the computer in the study. Browser history, Zillow, Redfin, Lake House property values, how to sell inherited property, power of attorney for elderly parents. His house, built with his own hands, worth approximately $2.5 million according to the estimates he found, was being researched like a commodity. He checked the mail before Karen could intercept it, found notices from real estate agents, market analysis reports for his address, glossy brochures about maximizing property value. He listened at doors, heard Karen on her phone. I just need him declared incompetent. Then the guardianship goes through. The house will sell for at least $2 million, maybe more. I know I'm behind on payments. Just give me another month. Payments, debts, desperation. Karen was drowning, and she saw his house as a life raft. Henry drove to town on a Tuesday morning in June. Mr. Henderson's office occupied the third floor of a converted Victorian house downtown. The stairs creaked, good oak, installed in the 1890s, still solid. Henry climbed them slowly, his knees protesting but his mind clear. The foundation holds long after the paint peels. James Henderson had handled Sarah's estate when she died. Mid-60s now, grey-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of face that had seen enough human nature to be unsurprised by anything. Henry. They shook hands. What brings you in? Henry sat in the leather chair, probably too expensive, probably purchased with billable hours, and told him everything. The strange behavior, the missing keys, the doctor calls, the real estate searches. Karen positioning herself as his caretaker while building a case for his incompetence. Mr. Henderson listened without interrupting, fingers steepled under his chin. When Henry finished, the lawyer leaned back and sighed. What you're describing is financial elder abuse, more common than people think. Adult children position themselves as caregivers, then manipulate the situation to control assets. Can she actually do it? Put me in a home and sell my house? If she gets power of attorney, yes. If she convinces a doctor you're incompetent, she can petition for guardianship. Once she has legal control, he spread his hands, your assets become hers to manage, and manage can include selling. The room felt suddenly cold, despite the June sun streaming through the windows. How do I stop her? Mr. Henderson opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. The most effective option, an irrevocable trust. Explain. You transfer your house into a trust. The trust owns it. You retain the right to live there for life. But you technically don't own the property anymore. which means Karen can't sell what you don't own, even with power of attorney. Can it be reversed? No. That's what irrevocable means. Once it's done, it's permanent. The trust owns the property until the terms are fulfilled, usually your death when it passes to whoever you've named as beneficiary. Henry thought about this. The finality. The implications. Who would I name? Anyone. A charity. A friend. You could even add conditions, that Karen only inherits if she meets certain requirements, passes sobriety tests, whatever you think appropriate. What about the Heritage Preservation Society? They're trying to save old craftsman homes. Mr. Henderson smiled. Perfect. Charitable trusts are extremely solid legally, very difficult to contest. How long? I can draft the papers by next week. We'll file with the county, transfer the deed. About a month to finalize, but once it's done, Henry... He leaned forward. There's no going back. Henry looked out the window at the street below. People going about ordinary lives, unaware that families could turn predatory, that love could become greed, that the people you raised could see you as nothing more than an obstacle to money. I'm sure, he said. The foundation holds long after the paint peels. Mr. Henderson blinked. I'm sorry? Carpentry principle. Build the foundation right, everything else is maintenance. The papers were ready on a Friday in July. Henry sat in Mr. Henderson's office with his reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing every page. Trust agreement, deed transfer, terms of occupancy, beneficiary designation, the Heritage Preservation Society of Lake Mills, dedicated to preserving historic craftsman architecture. This means Karen gets nothing? Henry asked. She can't sell the house. Upon your death, it goes to the society. They'll preserve it, possibly as a museum or educational center. Your craftsmanship will be remembered. Better than he'd hoped. Better than Karen deserved. He signed Henry James Vance, the same careful script he'd used to sign his marriage license 50 years ago. Mr. Henderson notarized the documents, filed them with the county clerk, shook Henry's hand. You're protected. Whatever Karen tries, she can't touch the house. Should I tell her? That's your choice. But Henry? The lawyer's expression turned serious. If she's really planning what you think, telling her might accelerate her timeline. She might try to move faster, get you declared incompetent before she discovers the house is gone. So stay quiet. Document everything. If she tries for guardianship, we'll have evidence of her motives. Henry left the office feeling lighter. The weight of worry, that constant fear that Karen would succeed, that he'd end up warehoused while she liquidated his life's work, had lifted. He drove home slowly, taking the long way around the lake. The house stood waiting, exactly as he'd left it. Karen's Mercedes sat in the driveway. She was inside on her laptop when he walked in. Hey, Pops, how was your appointment? Fine, he said. Everything's fine. She smiled her fake smile. Henry smiled back. The trap was set. Now all he had to do was wait for her to spring it. Karen made her move in August. Henry woke to find her in the kitchen with a stranger, professional-looking woman, 40-something leather portfolio. Pops, this is Dr. Marissa Chen. She's a geriatric specialist. I asked her to do a quick evaluation. I have a doctor. I know, but Dr. Chen specializes in cognitive health. I want to make sure you're getting the best care. Dr. Chen was thorough. Standard questions. What year? Who's the president? Count backward from 100. Henry passed easily. But then, Mr. Vance, your stepdaughter says you've been having trouble with daily tasks, forgetting bills, misplacing keys, leaving appliances on. No, Henry said calmly. Karen interrupted. Pops, remember last Tuesday? You left the stove burner on all afternoon. I didn't. You did. I found it when I got home. The kitchen could have caught fire. Henry looked at Dr. Chen. She's lying. Mr. Vance, sometimes people with early cognitive decline don't realize they're experiencing symptoms. I'm not in denial, because there's nothing to deny. But he saw it in her eyes. She'd already decided. Karen had been convincing. Karen had documentation. Karen had built this narrative for months. After Dr. Fai, Chen left. With promises to send recommendations, Henry confronted Karen directly. What are you doing? Taking care of you. Like I promised Mom. You're trying to have me declared incompetent. That's paranoid thinking, Pops. That's another symptom. She left the room before he could respond. Henry stood in his kitchen and understood the endgame was approaching. But he was ready. The foundation holds. The petition arrived via courier. Official documents, emergency guardianship request, Dr. Chen's affidavits, care plan recommendation, immediate placement in supervised facility for safety and well-being of Mr. Henry Vance. Facility name, Shady Pines Assisted Living. Karen had already toured it, already arranged financing, with herself as guarantor. It was elegant in a sociopathic way. Get guardianship, institutionalize him, sell the house to pay for care, pocket the difference. Henry called Mr. Henderson. They're moving fast, the lawyer said. Guardianship hearing in 10 days. I can represent you. Fight the petition. No. Silence. No, Mr. Henderson repeated. Let it happen. Let her get guardianship. Let her put me in the facility. Let her try to sell the house. Henry, she can't sell what I don't own. And when she tries, when she lists it, gets buyers, goes to closing, that's when the truth comes out. That's when she destroys herself completely. You're willing to live in that facility? Shady Pines has a reputation. I've survived worse than a bad nursing home. How long? As long as it takes. The foundation holds long after the paint peels, Mr. Henderson. I built that house to last. I can last too. The hearing was a formality. Dr. Chen testified. Karen cried fake tears. The judge granted emergency guardianship. Henry sat quietly through it all, playing the confused old man Karen had scripted for him. 3 days later, the orderlies arrived. The van pulled into Shady Pines Assisted Living at 7:34 a.m. Henry saw it through the rear window, a low concrete building, institutional architecture from the 1970s, surrounded by chain-link fence disguised with dying shrubs. The sign, Shady Pines, where family comes first, was weathered and peeling. The smell hit him when the doors opened. Bleach, overcooked food, urine poorly masked by air freshener. The particular odor of elderly people living too close together, of dignity eroded by institutional efficiency. This was where Karen had sent him. Marcus and Deshawn helped him out. He didn't need help, but he accepted it, staying in character. The automatic doors hissed open. The lobby tried to be cheerful. Floral wallpaper from the 90s, fake plants in brass pots, a reception desk staffed by a woman in scrubs who barely looked up. Room 217, she said, handing over a folder. Second floor, elevator's broken, use the stairs. Of course it was. They climbed. Down a corridor with flickering fluorescent lights humming like trapped insects. The smell got worse. Ammonia and defeat. Room 217, 12 feet by 10. Henry measured it automatically with his carpenter's eye. Narrow hospital bed, institutional dresser, vinyl chair by a window overlooking the parking lot. This was his new home. His prison. His waiting room. Here you go, Mr. Vance, Deshawn said, setting his bag on the dresser. Call buttons by the bed. Does it work? Henry asked. The orderlies exchanged glances. Sometimes, Marcus admitted. They left. Henry sat on the edge of the bed, mattress too soft, sheets smelling like industrial detergent, and looked at his cell. 32 days, Mr. Henderson had estimated. Maybe less, however long it took Karen to list the house, find buyers, and get to closing. 32 days of bad food and flickering lights and the smell of institutional failure. Henry could survive 32 days. He'd survived 3 years building his house, working every weekend, every evening after his day job. He'd survived losing Sarah. He'd survived this. Because at the end, when Karen stood at that closing table, when she thought victory was in her hands, the trap would spring, and she would learn what Henry had always known. The foundation holds long after the paint peels. Shady Pines ran on a schedule designed for efficiency, not dignity. 6 a.m. wake-up call. A nurse's aide, name tag reading Brenda, banged on Henry's door like she was serving a warrant. Breakfast in 30, Mr. Vance. 6:30, the dining hall. 60 elderly residents arranged at long tables under fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered. The smell of institutional food, watery oatmeal, weak coffee, scrambled eggs that had never seen a chicken, mixed with the sharper sense of medication and incontinence poorly managed. Henry sat at a table near the window and observed. Most residents were genuinely lost, eyes vacant, mouths slack, minds wandering through landscapes only they could see. A woman in her 80s talked to her dead husband. A man in his 90s ate with his hands, having forgotten what forks were for. The staff moved through the room like assembly line workers, wiping tables, collecting trays, their faces professionally neutral. But not everyone was lost. At the table next to Henry's, a woman in her late 70s sat with perfect posture, eating methodically, her eyes sharp and aware. She caught Henry looking and raised an eyebrow. "You're new," she said. Her voice was clear, educated. "And you don't belong here." "Margaret Thorne," she continued before Henry could respond. "Former high school English teacher, 42 years. They put me here because I fell once in my bathroom. Once. My son decided I was a liability." Henry nodded. "Henry Vance. Carpenter. They put me here because my stepdaughter wants my house." Margaret's smile was bitter. "At least you're honest about it. Most people here still believe their families have good intentions." She gestured at the room. "Half these people don't need to be here, but it's easier to warehouse us than actually help." "How long have you been here?" 8 months. Feels like 8 years. She pushed her oatmeal away uneaten. "The food is deliberately terrible, keeps us weak. Easier to manage that way." Henry filed that information away. He was in enemy territory now. He needed allies. Henry learned the rhythm of Shady Pines quickly. Morning breakfast, then activity time in the common room. A television played game shows at punishing volume. Occasionally someone organized bingo or chair exercises led by bored physical therapy students. Afternoon lunch, mystery meat, overcooked vegetables, jello in colors that didn't exist in nature. Then free time. Residents could return to their rooms or sit in the common area, or if still mobile, walk the courtyard. A cracked concrete path circling a few dying shrubs. Henry walked. Every afternoon, 75 laps, approximately 3 miles, keeping his body strong, his mind sharp. Evening. Dinner at 5 p.m. Early, like everything here assumed you had no life worth staying awake for. Then socializing in the common room until lights out at 9. It was a life reduced to its most basic functions: eat, sleep, wait for death. But Henry wasn't waiting for death. He was waiting for justice. Karen arrived on Thursday afternoon wearing a pantsuit that probably cost $1,000 and carrying a leather portfolio. She found Henry in the common room, sitting in a vinyl chair near the window, watching the parking lot. "Pops!" She sat beside him, setting the portfolio on her lap. "How are you settling in?" Henry said nothing. "The staff tells me you're doing well, eating your meals, taking your walks. That's wonderful." She opened the portfolio and pulled out papers. "I need you to sign some documents, just routine stuff for managing the house while you're here." She spread the papers on the small table beside his chair. Henry recognized the letterhead, Prestige Realty Group. "What are these?" He made his voice slightly confused, playing the role she expected. "Just listing paperwork, Pops. I'm putting the house on the market. It's too big for one person, and with your care expenses here." She produced a pen, expensive looking. "We talked about this, remember?" They hadn't talked about anything, but Henry nodded slowly, like a man whose memory was failing. "The house I built." "Yes, Pops, your beautiful house. But maintaining it is too expensive. This way we can use the money for your care, make sure you have everything you need." She was good. Henry had to give her that. The concerned daughter act was nearly perfect. If he didn't know better, if he hadn't documented her phone calls, her real estate searches, her gambling debts, he might have believed her. "Where do I sign?" Relief flooded Karen's face. She pointed to highlighted sections. "Here and here, an initial here," Henry signed. Shaky handwriting, like a man whose hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but each signature was legally binding, or would be, if he actually owned the property she was listing. He didn't. The trust did. Karen gathered the papers with barely concealed triumph. "Perfect. The house will be listed by next week. I've already had it appraised at $2.5 million. Can you believe that? The lake property market is incredible right now. That's nice, Henry said vaguely. It is, Pops. It really is. She stood, smoothed her pantsuit. I'll come visit again soon. You just focus on getting better. She left, heels clicking down the corridor, and Henry sat in his vinyl chair watching her Mercedes pull out of the parking lot. Let her list it. Let her believe she was winning. The trap was already set. Now he just had to wait for her to walk into it. Henry met Robert Chen on his 7th day at Shady Pines. The old man, probably 85, Chinese-American, with hands gnarled by arthritis, but eyes still bright with intelligence, was playing chess against himself in the corner of the common room. You play? Robert asked without looking up. Not in years. Sit. Keep me company. Everyone else here thinks chess is a brand of crackers. Henry sat. Robert moved a knight, considered the board, moved a pawn in response to his own move. Engineer, Robert said. 40 years building bridges. My daughter lives in California. Decided it was easier to put me here than help me maintain my apartment. He captured his own bishop with his rook. What's your story? Carpenter. Stepdaughter wants to sell my house. Ah, financial elder abuse. Classic. Robert moved his queen. Check and mate. Damn, I'm good. He looked at Henry. You fighting it? In my own way. Good. Most people here just accept it. They think family knows best. He started resetting the pieces. But family is often the worst. They see us as burdens, problems to solve, assets to liquidate. You sound like you've thought about this a lot. 8 months in this place gives you time to think. Robert gestured at the room. The flickering TV, the vacant-eyed residents, the overworked staff. This isn't care. This is warehousing. But I'm trapped. My daughter has power of attorney. She sold my apartment, took my savings for my care, and now I'm stuck here eating reconstituted eggs and watching The Price is Right. Henry filed this away too. Robert was sharp, aware, angry, potentially useful. If you're fighting back, Robert said quietly, I want to help. Whatever you need. Information, testimony, witness statements. I'm tired of being treated like I'm already dead. Henry nodded. I'll keep that in mind. Henry discovered the facility's workshop on his 10th day. The word workshop was generous. It was a converted storage room with a few basic tools, hand saws, hammers, screwdrivers, and scrap wood for simple projects. Most residents avoided it. The staff discouraged its use, probably worried about liability. But Henry needed to keep his hands busy. He found a piece of pine, cheap but workable, and began making a small box. Nothing fancy. Just a way to keep his fingers nimble and his mind focused. The smell of fresh-cut wood was overwhelming after 10 days of institutional bleach. It smelled like memory, like his real workshop, like freedom. He worked slowly, carefully, the way he'd always worked. Measure twice, cut once, join the corners properly, sand until smooth. The foundation holds long after the paint peels. One of the younger staff members, a nurse's aide named Marcus, not the orderly, different Marcus, stuck his head in. Mr. Vance, you're not supposed to be in here without supervision. I'm 72, not incompetent. Marcus hesitated. I know, but regulations. You going to report me? The aide looked at the small box Henry was building. My grandfather was a carpenter. He'd have liked you. He backed out of the doorway. I didn't see anything. Small victories. Henry overheard the first useful intelligence on his 12th day. He was in his room, the door cracked open slightly for air, when 2 nurses stopped in the hallway outside, voices carrying in the afternoon quiet. That Vance woman is a piece of work. It was Brenda, the morning aide. Did you hear her on the phone yesterday screaming at her real estate agent? What about? The second voice belonged to another nurse, younger, named Jasmine. The house isn't selling fast enough. She's furious. Kept saying she needs the money now that she has people calling her, demanding payment. Loan sharks? Probably. She mentioned casinos, gambling debts. Brenda lowered her voice, but Henry's hearing was still sharp. She also tried to get us to sedate her stepfather, said he'd be more manageable if we kept him on tranquilizers. We can't do that without a doctor's order. I know, but she implied she'd complain to management if we didn't cooperate. That was the word she used. Cooperate. Some families just want their elderly drugged into vegetables so they don't have to feel guilty about warehousing them. The old man seems sharp to me. I talked to him yesterday, perfectly coherent. I don't know why he's even here. Follow the money, hun, always follow the money. Their voices faded as they walked away. Henry sat on his bed and processed this information. Karen was desperate. The house wasn't moving fast enough. She had people, loan sharks probably, demanding payment. She was drowning. Good. Desperate people made mistakes. Margaret found Henry in the courtyard on day 15. "Your stepdaughter was here this morning," she said, sitting on the bench beside him. "I saw her in the administrative office. She was yelling." "About what?" "Couldn't hear everything. Something about market conditions and lowering the price. She looked—" Margaret paused, choosing her words carefully. "Frantic." Henry absorbed this. The house had been listed for 11 days. No offers yet. Karen's desperation was escalating. "She also asked about you," Margaret continued. "Wanted to know if you'd been acting confused, if you'd said anything about the house. The administrator told her patient information was confidential. She wasn't happy. Thank you for telling me. We look after each other here. Those of us who are still—" she gestured at her temple. "Present. We have to." She stood, preparing to leave. "Robert told me you're fighting back. Whatever you're doing, don't let them break you. Once you accept this place, once you give up, you're finished." Henry was eating lunch, if eating was the right word for mechanically consuming food devoid of flavor, when his phone rang. The ancient beige phone mounted on his wall. He almost didn't hear it over the noise of the dining hall. He excused himself, walked back to his room, picked up on the 5th ring. "Hello?" "Pops!" Karen's voice was manic with excitement. "I have amazing news. We got an offer." Henry said nothing. "Did you hear me?" "An offer on the house. $2. $4 million. It's slightly below asking, but in this market it's incredible. The buyers are a young family from Chicago. They love the craftsmanship. They want to close in 3 weeks." 3 weeks. 21 days. "That's nice," Henry said, making his voice confused, uncertain. "Nice? Pops, it's fantastic. This means you're taken care of. Your care here is secured. Everything's going to be fine." She was lying, of course. The money wouldn't go to his care. It would go to her debts, her casinos, her loan sharks. Maybe 10% would go to Shady Pines before she disappeared with the rest. "When do I sign?" Henry asked. "I'll bring the papers next week. There's just some closing documents, nothing complicated. You don't need to worry about anything." "Okay. I'm so relieved, Pops. You have no idea how much stress I've been under, managing everything, taking care of the house, dealing with all the bills." The bills she'd created, the debts she'd accumulated, the mess she'd made of her own life. "I'll see you soon, Pops. Love you." She hung up before he could respond. Henry stood holding the receiver, listening to the dial tone. 3 weeks. He could survive 3 weeks. Karen called again on day 20, this time during breakfast. Henry was summoned to the phone in the administrative office, a small room that smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. "Pops, just wanted to let you know the inspection went perfectly. The buyers hired someone to look at the house, check the structure, all that technical stuff. He said your craftsmanship is museum quality. Can you believe that?" Henry could believe it. He'd built that house to last 200 years. "They're not asking for any repairs," Karen continued. Her voice had an edge now, a brittleness that suggested she was barely holding it together. "That's rare. Usually buyers nickel and dime you with repairs, but they love it as is. We're on track to close on the 15th, 2.5 weeks away." "That's good," Henry said. "It is. It's very good. Because, Pops, I need to be honest with you, I'm in a difficult situation. I have some debts that need to be paid soon. Very soon. If this closing doesn't happen—" She laughed, but it was sharp, panicked. "Well, it needs to happen, that's all." "What kind of debts?" "Just financial stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. The important thing is we're almost there. Almost done. Then everything will be fine." She hung up quickly, like she was afraid he'd ask more questions. Henry returned to the dining hall where Margaret and Robert had saved him a seat. "Everything okay?" Margaret asked. Getting close, Henry said. 2.5 weeks. Robert moved his uneaten scrambled eggs around his plate. What happens in 2.5 weeks? Justice, Henry said. If I'm lucky. Karen arrived unannounced on day 25. Henry was in the courtyard, completing his afternoon walk, when she appeared. No advance call, no warning. She looked terrible. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup. Designer clothes rumpled like she'd slept in them. Pops, we need to talk. She led him to a corner of the courtyard, away from the few other residents shuffling along the cracked path. The closing is in 5 days, she said without preamble. Monday morning, 10 a.m. at Lakeside Title Company. I need you to understand something. This has to happen. Do you understand? It has to. I understand. No, I don't think you do. She was gripping his arm now, fingers digging in. I owe people money, Pops. Bad people. The kind who don't send collection letters. They've given me until next Friday. If I don't pay them... She released his arm, running her hands through her hair. The house sale covers everything. The casino debts, the credit cards, the loans, everything. Once it closes, I'm free. Henry looked at her, really looked at her. She'd aged 10 years in the past month. Dark circles under her eyes, a tremor in her hands. The desperate hollowness of someone who'd gambled everything on one final bet. What if it doesn't close? He asked. It will. It has to. She pulled papers from her bag, hands shaking. I need you to sign these. Pre-closing documents, just formalities. Henry took the papers, scanned them. More authorizations, more transfers, more documents that would be meaningless because he didn't own the property she was trying to sell. He signed them anyway. Karen watched him, eyes fevered. You're sure you signed them all? You didn't miss anything? I signed them. Good. That's good. She stuffed the papers back in her bag. 5 days, Pops, 5 days and this is all over. You'll be taken care of, I promise. She left quickly, practically running to her Mercedes. Henry stood in the courtyard and watched her drive away. 5 days. 5 days until Karen learned that promises mean nothing when they're built on lies. The weekend passed slowly. Saturday, Henry worked in the makeshift workshop, finishing the small box he'd been building. It wasn't his best work. The wood was cheap pine, the tools inadequate, but it was honest work, good work, the kind that kept his mind focused. Sunday. He walked his laps, ate his meals, talked with Margaret and Robert about nothing important and everything important. They'd formed a small coalition, the lucid ones, the ones who hadn't given up, the ones who still remembered they were human beings with dignity and rights. Whatever you're planning, Robert said during lunch, I hope it works. It will, Henry said. Or it won't. Either way, I tried. Margaret squeezed his hand. You're braver than most. Most people here just accept their fate. I'm not brave, Henry said. I'm just patient. There's a difference. Karen arrived Monday morning, 2 days before closing, with a briefcase and an expression of barely contained hysteria. She found Henry in his room, sitting in his vinyl chair, looking out at the parking lot. Final documents, Pops. She dumped the briefcase contents onto his bed. I need you to review these. Well, not review, just sign. You trust me, right? I trust you. It was true in a way. He trusted her to be exactly who she'd proven herself to be, desperate, greedy, willing to warehouse her stepfather to pay off gambling debts. She spread the papers across the bed like a dealer spreading cards. This is the closing statement. This authorizes the title transfer. This confirms you've received notice of the sale. You have, right? I told you about it. You told me. Good, good. Sign here, initial here, sign again here. She was manic now, pen in hand, pointing to highlighted sections. We're almost there, Pops. Almost done. Just need your signatures. Henry signed everything she put in front of him. With each signature, Karen's breathing quickened. Her hands shook less. Color returned to her face. She thought she was winning. The closing is Wednesday morning, she said, gathering the papers with reverent care. 10 a.m. I'll be there. The buyers will be there. The money will be transferred. And then... She exhaled, long and shaky. Then everything is fixed. All my problems go away. I can start over. "That's good," Henry said. "It is, it really is." She stood, briefcase clutched to her chest like a life preserver. "I know this was hard, Pops. The move, the facility, selling the house. But it was necessary. You understand that, right? It was necessary." She needed him to absolve her, to grant forgiveness she hadn't earned and didn't deserve. Henry said nothing. Karen left, and Henry sat in his vinyl chair watching the sun set over the parking lot. 2 days. 2 more days of institutional food and flickering lights, and the smell of bleach masking decay. 2 more days of patience. Then the trap would spring. Henry didn't sleep well Monday night. Not from nerves. He'd made his peace with what was coming. But because down the hall a resident was crying out in their sleep, and the night staff ignored it, and the fluorescent lights in the hallway hummed their endless song of indifference. He lay in the darkness and thought about his house, the way the morning sun hit the eastern windows, warming the kitchen while he made coffee. The smell of cedar from his workshop mixing with the smell of lake water. The floor he'd laid, each board chosen for grain and color. The walls he'd framed, every joint checked for square. The roof he'd shingled, every nail driven true. 43 years of work, 43 years of mornings and evenings, weekends and holidays, sawdust and sweat, and the honest labor of building something meant to last. Karen thought she could sell all that with a signature and some paperwork. Tomorrow she'd learn otherwise. The resident down the hall finally stopped crying. The facility settled into its particular brand of institutional silence, not peaceful, just quiet. The hum of machinery, the beep of monitors, the shuffle of night staff making rounds. Henry closed his eyes and waited for morning. Dawn came slowly to Shady Pines. Henry woke at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before Brenda's wake-up bang, and lay in the too-soft bed watching the ceiling. Today was the day. Today Karen would walk into Lakeside Title Company believing she'd won, believing the $2.4 million check was minutes away from being in her hands, believing her debts would be paid, her loan sharks satisfied, her life salvaged. Today she would learn the truth. Henry got up. Dressed in the clothes Karen had packed for him a month ago, simple pants, button-down shirt, nothing special. He looked at himself in the small mirror above the sink, thinner than he'd been, grey stubble on his jaw, the physical toll of 32 days in this place. But his eyes were clear, sharp, ready. Brenda's wake-up bang came at 6 a.m. exactly. "Breakfast in 30, Mr. Vance." Henry went to breakfast, ate his oatmeal without tasting it, drank his weak coffee. The dining hall buzzed with its usual sounds, elderly people chewing, staff moving efficiently, the television playing morning news at punishing volume. Margaret caught his eye across the room, raised her coffee cup in a subtle salute. Robert nodded from his table. They knew, somehow they knew today was the day. After breakfast, Henry returned to his room and sat in his vinyl chair. The closing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Lakeside Title Company, 15 miles away. Karen would be there by now. Early, because she couldn't afford to be late. The buyers, that young family from Chicago, would be there. The real estate agents, the title officer with her neat stacks of paperwork. And Mr. Henderson would be there, waiting. Henry looked at his phone, the ancient beige one mounted on the wall, and willed it to ring. The morning stretched long. 9 a.m., 9:30 a.m., 9:45 a.m. Somewhere across town, in a conference room with mahogany furniture and leather chairs, Karen was sitting at a table preparing to sign documents that would transfer ownership of a house she didn't own. Somewhere in that same room, Mr. Henderson was reviewing papers, saying nothing, waiting for the exact right moment to detonate the truth. 10 a.m. The closing would be starting now. Henry sat in his vinyl chair in room 217 of Shady Pines Assisted Living and waited for the phone to ring. The foundation holds long after the paint peels, and today, finally, after 32 days of patience, of bad food and flickering lights, of playing the confused old man while Karen destroyed herself piece by piece, today the foundation would prove its worth. Today, justice would come. Henry waited. Karen's hands were sweating. She sat at the mahogany conference table. Not real mahogany, her stepfather would have noticed that immediately. Just decent veneer. and tried to keep them still in her lap. The leather chair was too cold. The air conditioning was too strong. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching herself from outside her body. This was it. This was salvation. $2.4 million minus commissions, $144,000. Minus closing costs, $28,000. That left roughly $2. $23 million. From that, pay the mortgage she'd secretly taken on the house, $180,000. Pay the credit cards, $95,000. Pay the loan sharks, $250,000. And she'd been lucky they'd only broken one finger last week, just the pinky, a warning. Pay the casino markers, $180,000. That left approximately $1.5 million, enough to disappear. Start over. Become someone else in Florida or Arizona or anywhere that wasn't Lake Mills. The buyers sat across from her, Brad and Jennifer Morrison, early 30s, holding hands nervously. Their real estate agent, Diane something, blonde highlights, too much perfume, sat beside them making small talk about closing day jitters. Karen's agent, Derek, sat next to her organizing papers in his portfolio. He'd been distant lately, asking uncomfortable questions about the title, about Henry's competency, about the guardianship. But he was here. That was what mattered. The title officer, Patricia Owens, sat at the head of the table with her laptop and her professional smile. "We're just waiting for one more person," Patricia said, glancing at the clock. "A representative from the estate attorney's office. Should be here any moment." Karen's stomach clenched. "Estate attorney? I wasn't told anyone else would be here." Standard procedure for guardianship sales. Just a formality. The door opened. A man in his 60s entered, grey suit, leather briefcase, the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Good morning, everyone. James Henderson, attorney at law. My apologies for the delay." He sat at the opposite end of the table from Patricia and set his briefcase down with a soft thud that sounded to Karen like a coffin closing. Karen stared at him. She didn't recognize him. Why didn't she recognize him? "Wonderful," Patricia said. "Now we can begin. Let me just pull up the property information." She clicked through screens on her laptop. 1247 Lakeshore Drive. Current owner listed as... She stopped. Her professional smile faltered. "I'm sorry, one moment." She picked up her phone, dialed. "Hi, yes, it's Patricia in conference room B. Can you pull the deed history for 1247 Lakeshore Drive? Something's not matching in my system." Karen's heart started pounding. "What's wrong?" "Just a moment, please." The silence in the room was suffocating. Brad and Jennifer exchanged confused glances. Derek shifted in his seat. Diane checked her phone. Mr. Henderson sat perfectly still, watching. Patricia listened to whoever was on the phone. Her expression changed. Confusion, then surprise, then something like alarm. She hung up. "Miss Vance," she said slowly, "I'm afraid we have a significant problem." "What kind of problem?" Karen's voice came out higher than she intended. Patricia turned her laptop screen so everyone could see. According to county records, the deed to 1247 Lakeshore Drive was transferred 4 months ago, June 22nd, into an irrevocable trust called the Vance Family Heritage Trust, managed by the Heritage Preservation Society of Lake Mills. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. "That's..." Karen's mouth was dry. "That's impossible. I have guardianship. I have power of attorney. Henry doesn't own anything except the house." "Actually," Mr. Henderson said quietly, opening his briefcase, "Henry doesn't own the house. The trust does. Has for 4 months. Every head turned toward him. Karen felt the room tilting. "Who are you?" "James Henderson. I've been Henry Vance's attorney for 15 years. I drafted the trust documents." He pulled out a thick folder and set it on the table. Filed with the county clerk on June 22nd, Henry transferred the property into an irrevocable trust, naming himself as lifetime beneficiary with right of occupancy, and the Heritage Preservation Society as remainder beneficiary upon his death. "No." Karen stood up, chair scraping loudly. "No, that's not possible. He couldn't, he's incompetent. The court declared him incompetent." "The incompetency ruling came in September," Mr. Henderson said calmly. 3 months after the trust was created, the trust was executed while Henry was fully competent. In fact, he pulled out another document. Here are medical records from his primary physician, Dr. Patel, confirming Henry showed no signs of cognitive decline as of June. The competency evaluation that led to your guardianship was conducted by Dr. Marissa Chen, a specialist you specifically hired, and was based primarily on incidents you reported. Incidents that, according to Henry's documentation, never actually occurred. Brad Morrison spoke for the first time. Wait, are you saying this woman tried to sell a house she doesn't own? That's exactly what I'm saying. Karen's legs felt weak. This is fraud. He can't just give away the house. I have guardianship. You have guardianship over a person, not property transferred before that guardianship was granted, Mr. Henderson interrupted. The trust is legally ironclad. Henry protected his assets from exactly this situation. Patricia was typing rapidly, probably documenting everything for the inevitable legal proceedings. I'm afraid this sale cannot proceed. Without clear title, we cannot transfer the deed. The purchase agreement will have to be terminated. We put down $50,000 in earnest money, Jennifer Morrison said, her voice sharp with anger. Who's returning that? Everyone looked at Karen. Derek stood up, backing away from the table. The earnest money went into escrow. It'll be returned. Did it go into escrow? Mr. Henderson asked, looking directly at Karen. Or did you access it early using your power of attorney? Because according to the escrow agent I spoke with this morning, you withdrew $45,000 last week, claiming you needed it for property repairs before closing. The room went silent. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. I had expenses, the nursing home bills, the legal fees. Those weren't your expenses to pay with their money, Derek snapped. He grabbed his portfolio. I'm done. I'm officially withdrawing as your agent. This is fraud, felony fraud. I could lose my license for being anywhere near this. He left, practically running. Diane, the buyer's agent, was already on her phone calling her broker. Brad Morrison stood, pulling his wife up with him. We want our money back, all of it, and we're talking to our attorney. I don't have it, Karen said. The words came out flat, dead. I spent it. On what? Jennifer's voice was shrill. Debts. I had debts. You spent our $50,000 on your personal debts. Brad's face was red. That's theft. The district attorney will be very interested in this, Mr. Henderson said. He was still calm, still seated, but his words fell like hammer blows. Listing a property you don't own, accepting earnest money under false pretenses, forging documents claiming ownership, misusing power of attorney. And let's not forget the fraudulent guardianship petition. Dr. Chen's evaluation was based on false information you provided. That's elder abuse, Ms. Vance. That's a felony in this state. Karen sat back down heavily. The room was spinning. I can't go to prison. I can't. The loan sharks, they'll kill me if I don't pay them. That's not Henry's problem, Mr. Henderson said. That's yours. Patricia closed her laptop. I'll be filing a report with our insurance company and the State Attorney General's office. This closing is terminated. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, you'll want to contact an attorney about recovering your earnest money. The Morrisons left, furious, already on their phones. Diane left without a word, heels clicking rapidly down the hall. Patricia left, carrying her laptop like evidence. Karen sat alone at the conference table with Mr. Henderson. Henry knew, she said. It wasn't a question. Henry knew. He documented everything, every missing key you planted, every fake incident, every phone call to his doctor. He let you play out your hand because he wanted there to be no doubt, no possible doubt, about what you were trying to do. Where is he? Shady Pines, waiting for my call. After which he'll be checking himself out. He's not actually incompetent, you see, and we have extensive documentation proving it. He'll be going home, to the house the trust guarantees he can live in for the rest of his life. Mr. Henderson stood, gathering his papers. I'd suggest you retain a criminal defense attorney, Ms. Vance. Contact you can expect from the DA's office within the week. Elder abuse, fraud, theft, misuse of power of attorney. You're looking at multiple felony charges. He walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. Shady Pines will be billing you directly for Henry's 32-day stay. You signed as guarantor, remember? That's approximately $13,000, due within 30 days. They're quite strict about payment." He left. Karen sat alone in the conference room. The air conditioning hummed. Outside the window, she could see ordinary people walking to ordinary jobs, living ordinary lives, unaware that her entire world had just collapsed. $2.4 million. Salvation. Gone. The loan sharks would come for her. The casino would sue. The credit cards would default. The house, Henry's house, the house she'd spent months planning to sell, wasn't hers and never would be. She'd lost everything. And Henry, senile, confused, helpless Henry, had orchestrated the entire thing. Karen put her head in her hands and tried not to scream. The phone rang. Henry picked it up on the second ring. "Hello? Henry, it's done." Mr. Henderson's voice was calm, professional, but Henry could hear the satisfaction underneath. "How did she take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. The buyers are furious. The agents fled. The title officer is filing reports. Hand Karen—" A pause. "She's destroyed, Henry, completely. When can I leave?" "I'm 15 minutes away. I'll handle the discharge paperwork." "You'll walk out today." Henry hung up and stood. He looked around room 217 one last time. The narrow bed, the vinyl chair, the window overlooking the parking lot. 32 days of his life spent in this box. 32 days of patience. It was over. He packed his single bag, the clothes Karen had chosen, the book he'd been reading, the small framed photo of Sarah. Everything fit easily. Margaret appeared in his doorway. "You're leaving." "I'm leaving." She smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it reached her eyes. "I hope wherever you're going is better than here." "It's home," Henry said. "That's better than anywhere." Mr. Henderson handled the facility administrator, a nervous man named Phillips, who'd probably already called the facility's lawyers. "Mr. Vance is leaving," the attorney said. "He was never legally detained. The guardianship was based on fraudulent evidence. If you attempt to stop him, you'll be guilty of false imprisonment." Phillips signed the discharge papers. Henry walked out the front doors of Shady Pines carrying his bag. The October air hit him, cold and clean, smelling of fallen leaves and freedom. No more bleach, no more institutional food, no more fluorescent lights. Mr. Henderson's car waited in the parking lot. They drove in silence for the first few minutes, leaving Shady Pines behind. "Karen will be arrested," Mr. Henderson said. "Multiple felony charges. She'll try to plea bargain, probably get probation, restitution, community service. No prison time, but her life is effectively over. Felony record, debt, the loan sharks. She'll spend years digging out of this hole." "That's her choice to make," Henry said. They turned onto Lakeshore Drive, and there it was. His house, standing exactly as he'd left it 32 days ago. Solid. True. The afternoon sun illuminating the cedar shingles he'd installed in 1983. The workshop, the porch, the windows. Every board, every nail, every careful measurement, still standing. Still his, in the ways that mattered. Mr. Henderson pulled into the driveway. "Welcome home, Henry." Henry walked through his house slowly, reacquainting himself with every room. The kitchen cabinets he'd built, the living room floor he'd laid, the workshop where sawdust still covered his workbench, and the half-finished jewelry box waited exactly where he'd left it. He picked up the box. Cedar, warm in his hands, smelling like memory. The foundation holds long after the paint peels. He'd repeated that phrase to himself every day for 32 days, through bad food and flickering lights, through Karen's visits and her fake tears, through the patience required to let her destroy herself completely. Now he understood what it really meant. Foundations weren't just about buildings, they were about principles, about knowing who you were and what you valued, and protecting those things with the same care you'd use to build a house that would last 200 years. Karen had seen him as an obstacle, an asset to liquidate, a problem to solve. She'd been wrong. Henry sat in his workshop and ran his hand across his workbench, the same bench where he'd stood when the orderlies arrived 32 days ago. The Heritage Preservation Society would get the house when he died. They'd preserve it, teach in it, Show young carpenters how things used to be built. His craftsmanship would outlive him. That was enough. That was more than enough. Outside, the October sun moved across the lake, turning the water gold. Inside, the house stood warm and solid, every joint true, every measurement exact. Henry Vance, master carpenter, widower, survivor, was home. The foundation had held, and it always would.